Welcome to The Analysis. I'm Greg Wilpert. Today we'll take a closer look at the outcome of Peru's June 6th presidential election, where the left candidate, Pedro Castillo, narrowly won the presidency. Over 18 million Peruvians cast ballots last Sunday to choose a new president in a second-round runoff vote. They faced a very contrasting choice between right-wing Keiko Fujimori, the daughter of the former dictator Alberto Fujimori, and the leftist Pedro Castillo, a rural teacher and union organizer. With 97% of the ballots counted, newcomer Pedro Castillo appears to have won by a slender margin of half a percentage point, 50.25% to 49.75%, or by nearly 100,000 votes. So what happened? Why did so many Peruvians vote for Fujimori, someone who promised more neoliberalism and who faces numerous corruption charges? And what can we expect from a Castillo presidency in Peru? Joining me from Lima, Peru, to make sense of this is Francesca Emanuel. She's a Peruvian graduate student in anthropology at American University and also a columnist for the Peruvian news outlet Huayca. She went to Peru to observe the election. Thanks for joining me today, Francesca.
Thank you, Greg.
So Pedro Castillo, the rural teacher and union organizer, came out of nowhere in the first round of the vote last April with about 19% of the vote, well ahead of Keiko's 13%. And polls showed that, as far as I understand, Castillo was slightly ahead of Fujimori until a few weeks before the election. So what happened? How did the vote come to be so close?
Well, since the first round, all the media allied together to support Keiko Fujimori and to actively attack Castillo. They called him a terrorist. They said that he had ties with the Shining Path, and they said that Castillo was a communist. The media and the big companies started a robust campaign against him. So they put all over Lima, for example, banners, big signs, encouraging people not to vote for communism, making a parallelism between communism and poverty and scarcity. They were spreading fake news about Castillo, saying that he was going to expropriate all the private properties, that he was going to make Peru another Venezuela. But I think they realized in the past 2 weeks that the message that was creating more fear in the population was the message about terrorism and the Shining Path. And they went ahead. They had several of the members of his party on the media several times, not them being interviewed, but showing pictures of them supposedly being part of the Shining Path or being part of Movadef. Many of those claims were with no evidence, and even though if there was any connection of them with certain radical leftist groups that are fighting for the liberation or the freedom of the Shining Path members who are now in prison. In fact, that organization is not illegal in Peru. But the reality is that many of these allegations were with no evidence. They even pushed for one of the party members of Pedro Castillo, who won to be a congressman in the next Congress, Peruvian Congress. They pushed for him to reopen a process against him in the judiciary to put him in prison, supposedly for organizing a terrorist attack, a process that he went through years ago, and it was there was a sentence that said that he had no connection with this supposedly organized terrorist attack.
Well, I guess a kind of related question, though, is why do you think Fujimori continues to enjoy so much support? I mean, she's faced corruption charges of, having embezzled something like $17 million for her presidential campaign, and she also has a track record as being an adherent of her father's authoritarian and neoliberal economic policy agenda. So, what's going on there? Why is she so massively popular? It seems.
Well, for the last 30 years, in Peru, there has been imposed an economic model that has given a lot of power to different uh, big companies and power groups. For example, I was talking about the media. 80% of the media belongs to only one company, El Grupo El Comercio. El Comercio has around 20 magazines and newspapers. I mean, you go to a kiosk to get a newspaper, and like 90% of them have headlines saying how horrible Castillo is, or how great would be a situation or a presidency of Keiko Fujimori. So that's big. The other concentration of power here is in this business groups. So, for example, there are monopolies like the drugstores. There are two companies that run all the drugstores in Peru. They don't want to lose power. They don't want to lose their oligopoly. Same happened with beer. Like 98% of beer in Peru is run by one company. And I can give you a whole list of these companies that are really running the country, and they are like 14 families that are running the country, and they are putting all their money to convince people that Keiko is the option, and the other one is the option of scarcity, poverty, as I said before, coming Venezuela. And we have to understand that this is not just a rhetoric about terrorism or the shining path. This is something that people went through. I mean, there was a real internal war here in Peru, and more than 60,000 people were killed. No, half of them well, not all half of them, but thousands by Fujimori's regime and the previous regime as well, but half of them by the shining path. So people remember that. And it was a very sad period in our history. So yeah, they are afraid of this potential situation of coming back there, even though there's no any indication that anything like that would happen. I want to tell you an episode, a horrible, dramatic, tragic attack, actually. 2 weeks ago, or around 2 weeks ago, in the jungle in Peru, in an area called El Braem, near to El Rio N, the river N, and 16 people were killed, and at least a child was burned in this terrorist attack, supposedly. This happened 2 weeks before the elections. The military said that it was the shining path. An attack like that has never happened in the past 30 years. This big, 16 people killed by the shining path, and you had all the pictures of these dead people with blood and so on all over the media. Supposedly an attack organized by the Shining Path, and supposedly they spread out a bunch of flyers saying that if for people who voted for Keiko, they were gonna have a revenge against them. So this sounds very suspicious, and I don't want to say that Keiko Fujimori and her party organized this, but definitely it doesn't seem likely that the Shining Path suddenly, if they want to support Pedro Castillo, they kill these 16 people and they spread out flyers saying that they were gonna attack the people who vote for Keiko Fujimori. So I'm talking about a campaign that is very violent and aggressive. And Keiko Fujimori, as you mentioned before, she can go to prison. And not only her, most of her party can go to prison if they lose this election. So for them, it's like life or death. And they are putting all their resources and getting all these alliances, even with people who were against her before, like Mario Vargas Llosa, who is the literature Nobel Prize from Peru, who actively campaigned to support her. They even had an event in Ecuador with all the right wing in Latin America. Keiko couldn't go because she is being under investigation. She couldn't leave the country, but they had the event online supporting her and claiming that she was gonna support democracy. In the past 2 weeks, Leopoldo Lopez and his wife, Lilian Tintori, came to Peru to campaign for her. They were all over the media. They had an event with Keiko Fujimori. It was ironic because they had an event with Keiko Fujimori, and Keiko pledged that she was going to comply with all the rules of democracy, and Leopoldo Lopez was the person who was confirming that she was going to do that. And Tuto Quiroga from Bolivia, he was all over the media a couple of days ago talking about how it would be horrible for Peru if Pedro Castillo wins. So this is not only an elections that people in Peru and the big companies and the powers in Peru care about, but the whole region, because this can change the correlations of power in the region. So this was an effort from here and also from outside for Keiko to win, and definitely, it had some results. That's why it's very tight. It's also true that 1/3 of the population lives here in Lima, and 1/3 of this population has no understanding of that this development that they think that the country went through, it didn't reach out other places than their very fancy neighborhoods. And so there is several factors that has led us to this result.
I guess one could even say that it's almost a miracle that Pedro Castillo got as far as he did, considering all the obstacles he faced. But I want to get into, what's going to happen now. Fujimori apparently says that she plans to challenge some of the vote count, alleging irregularities. Is there any evidence of that, and could this still change the outcome of the result?
Yeah, so let me go back a little bit to the fact that it's incredible, actually, that Pedro Castillo won after all these attacks and after all these big power groups like Ally and going after him. Just a few days ago, there was the end of the campaign and a big event on Thursday, I think. On Thursday. And Keiko had a huge show. She brought singers. The son of Mario Vargas Llosa was there. It was televised in all the TV channels. While Pedro Castillo had 30 seconds on Peruvian TV channels. 30 seconds. So this is the attack is I never seen a campaign like this, and I came here with a couple of delegations from Democratic Socialists of America and from Progressive International. Progressive International has experience in observing elections, and they are shocked as well. Wherever we go, with whoever we meet, the Coordinadora Nacional de Derechos Humanos, they are telling us that there hasn't been this level of aggression and violence and inequalities in terms of coverage of the campaign. So coming back to the other subject, last night Keiko Fujimori had a press conference saying that there was evidence of fraud in polling stations. She talks about irregularities. She showed 3 videos that have no sense, I have to say, no sense, to the point that the media outside Peru are talking just about irregularities because really there's no evidence. Even the OAS and the European Union has said that there is no evidence of any fraud. But the problem of these allegations is that she is creating a narrative. And there is almost 50% of the population that doesn't want Castillo there, that are super afraid of what can happen in the next 5 years of his presidency. So she's trying to destabilize this process, and she's trying to bring people to the streets and challenge Castillo and challenge his presidency. She is acting not only in an irresponsible manner, but she's acting in a criminal way, as she has been acting for the past 30 years, actually. She was the first lady when her father was the dictator of this country.
I want to turn to Castillo. I mean, what do we know? I mean, we don't know too much about him because he comes out of nowhere practically. But what did he promise to do, and what do you think we can expect him to do as president?
Yeah. So Castillo is, as you said, a rural teacher. It's a victory for the Peruvian working class people, for the Peruvian campesinos, for the indigenous, that he has won these elections. It has never happened in the history of Peru that someone from the working class becomes a president ever. And so we have to understand that and see it in perspective. His party is a very weak party. It wasn't a national party. It was a regional party. It's still kind of like bumpy and disorganized because it just came suddenly to become the biggest political force in this country. So his party is a leftist party. He was invited by this party. He wasn't a member of this party. He is a leftist, but he still has certain discrepancies with the historical left in Peru. And the left of Veronica Mendoza, who was another candidate in the first elections, who ran 2 times for the presidency. For example, he is still conservative. He thinks that abortion shouldn't be passed, and that LGBTIQ people shouldn't get married. He has said it openly, but he also has shown that he's open to change his positions. In the past few weeks, Veronica Mendoza, this political former candidate I mentioned, met with him. They signed a pact, an agreement, and they are talking about these other issues. And he said that if people in Peru want to support abortion and if want to support a gay marriage, he will do it. He will support it as well. He is supporting the change of the constitution, new constitution, change of a constitution that was approved under the dictatorship of Alberto Fujimori in 1993. And yeah, so he supports land reform, and he also supports mining, but he says under conditions that protects labor rights and the environment. So he is now putting together a more robust plan for his presidency. He is receiving support for many academics and former politicians from the left, many of them from Nuevo Peru, the party of Verónica Mendoza, and he has shown himself with them in several events. So I think we will know soon the specifics of his next plan. He has been like his plan for the presidency. He has been just responding to the attacks by the media. These attacks, as I said, have been coming from all over the place.
Now, you mentioned that he has only a very small party. I imagine that they don't have a majority in the legislature. So I'm just wondering, what are his chances of actually implementing his program? I mean, does he have enough support in the legislature? How's it look?
Yeah, so his party is not that is small per se. It was regional, right? It has support. It's kind of weak in terms of organizing, because they become of being a regional party to now a national one. So they are going through that transition. There are many mechanisms about communications, strategies, working groups that are not placed yet. They have 37 members in Congress. In Peru, there are 130 members of Congress. So yeah, definitely they don't have the majority. The majority is 66 members. Verónica Mendoza and her party had only 5 members, and there's another leftist liberal party that has 3 members. So not even summing up that we can reach the 66 members that are needed for a majority. But what is true is that Keiko Fujimori has a lot of parties and social movements that hate her, that reject her. And I think, and some people that we met during these days think, that the scenario will change when he wins, that there are some parties that will support some of his proposals. One of the challenges, of course, the new constitution. The constitution we have now doesn't have many path to change it. Of course, it was coming from a dictatorship. So he will need a lot of support in the streets and a lot of international support in order to put together and reach his policies, his leftist policies.
Actually, that's the next thing I wanted to turn to briefly, is the international context. You mentioned earlier that his election changes the geopolitics of Latin America. I just wanted to know if you could say a little bit more about that. What does it change specifically?
Yeah, so Pedro Castillo has been very clear. He has been close to Evo Morales. He has said publicly that for him, Evo Morales' presidency and Rafael Correa's presidency in Ecuador is an example for him. He looks up to them. And he has also said publicly that he doesn't consider Maduro a dictator, as many of the governments in this region does. So he's very clear about that. He has said that he wants to strengthen the international integration in this part of the region, and we're talking about UNASUR, CELAC, los países del ALBA. So yeah, we have historically Peru not being part of El Grupo de Lima. I mean, Peru was a leader of the right wing in the region, and was a big ally for decades of the U.S. and U.S. Imperial policies towards the region.
I think we just need to explain what the Lima Group is, because most people probably don't know.
Yeah. So El Grupo de Lima was actually, it is a group of countries in Latin America that got together to try to overthrow the presidency of Maduro in Venezuela. And they met several times, pushing Maduro, like trying to delegitimize his government, and never mentioning the sanctions of the U.S. against Venezuela. So this group has been very useful for the right wing, not only governments but also right wing companies in the region. They have been having events, and it's the group that actually kind of organized this event for Keiko in Ecuador, and with Lasso also helping there. So it's huge. It's huge. These results in these elections are huge for the region and the world.
Now, finally, I just want to get to a point about the context that is the significance of this election for Peru, because just like in Colombia, the battle against insurgent groups such as the Shining Path and I guess also maybe the Tupac Amaru revolutionary movement, they served as an excuse to repress Peru's left, it seems. Now, do you think that Castillo winning the presidency signals an end to the left's marginalization in Peru?
So Greg, this is a tough question because if Castillo doesn't organize his own political movement, if he doesn't strengthen these alliances that I've talked about, so it can be harmful for the left here. As I said, this is the first time that leftist candidate that is coming from the working class is winning the presidency. It's a huge victory, not only because he's there, but also for the left, because we never saw this coming. And as you said, for decades, the left has been criminalized, being tied, even though it was fighting against the Shining Path, being tied with the Shining Path, as if the left was the same. So if Castillo doesn't doesn't reach some of these policies of redistribution of wealth, it can be harmful for the left here. And there are some parties here that are scared about it. We have talked to them, and they have said that they will help and they will support him with any means they have, because that also affect them and of course affect the country, right? And the future of the left.
Okay, well, we're going to leave it there. I'm sure we're going to come back to you again sometime soon, hopefully, to see how things are going. I was speaking to Francesca Emanuel, Peruvian graduate student of anthropology and freelance journalist. Thanks again, Francesca, for having joined me today.
Thank you.
And thanks to our viewers and listeners for joining theAnalysis.news. Please don't forget to head to our website and make a donation so we can continue to provide programming such as this. Thanks.